you so much, Steve. Really appreciate that kind introduction, and I appreciate you and Gibson Dunn hosting us here today. And thank you all for coming. It's an amazing turnout around this table, and I hope that is both a testament to the friendship and loyalty that you all have shown to the Echoing Green community, and also sort of the power and the promise of the speakers that you're going to hear from in a second. I am actually not going to do the introduction of our speakers. I'm going to introduce the person who will introduce them. So I'm sort of once removed from this, but just, most of you know Echoing Green, but let me just say a moment, a couple of things about Echoing Green to sort of tee up the afternoon, and in particular just say a couple of words about the work that Echoing Green has done in the international human rights field, because we have a significant track record of funding emerging leaders in this area, and you'll be hearing from two of those emerging leaders momentarily. As most of you know, Echoing Green has been around for about 20 years, and our sole purpose is to provide initial funding and support to some of the world's best emerging social entrepreneurs. I know that's a mouthful. Essentially, it's finding people with amazing dreams for social change and then providing them the start for them to spread their wings and see through their vision for social change. A number of people have said, well, I've never heard of Echoing Green, but most of you know some of our investments that have done so well over the years, whether it's Teach for America or City or Citizen Schools. We also have folks in this room who are part of our community. We've got Mark Levine, who started the first credit union in Washington Heights, credit where credit is due. We've got Tony Blackman, a world-renowned hip-hop artist who's doing amazing work with artists in Africa. We've got Dan Ravisher doing amazing work on intellectual property law through the Public Patent Foundation. Alain Maisel, who did an amazing arts project in Washington, D.C., and who is now a civil rights attorney here in New York City. And I could go on, but it's been important work that's been done through our community over the years. When you look at what we fund everything. We invest in people and their dreams. It just so happens that a number of folks who care about international human rights have applied to us over the years, and I think there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it's hard to get seed funding for anything. Just like anyone who starts a for-profit business, it is very difficult to get started. I think that is compounded for international human rights leaders because often that work is dangerous, it is controversial, and it is really risky and on the edge, and there are not a lot of groups who will give that first funding. Echoing Green absolutely steps into that breach to support these emerging human rights leaders. And I think when you look at our track record, we've done a great job of funding some of the best organizations around the world, from Earth Rights International. Some of you may know their environmental rights work, which has been recognized by the Goldman Prize, which is considered the Nobel Prize for the environment. Great work we've done in Africa and other places around the world. So here to introduce our speakers today is someone who I greatly admire and who care a lot about, Betsy Apple.
And her project, and I think Emily's project as well, understand that accountability for horrific abuses, preventing the next abuse, and healing the wounds from the past depend upon confronting that past and confronting that persecution. And both of these people put the tools in the hands of their clients or their constituents or their participants in order to break this link between persecution and survival. And with that, I'd like to invite Emily to the podium. Thank you.
I am Emily Arnold-Fernandez. I'm the Executive Director of Asylum Access. And Asylum Access was founded on a very simple principle, really. The principle that refugees are people with rights, not just people with needs. As Betsy said, there are about 14 million refugees in the world. Resettlement in the US is open to about 0.5% of those. So the vast majority of these 14 million refugees remain in Africa, Asia, or Latin America, usually in a country nearby their own. Until now, our response as a global community to this massive number of refugees has focused solely on needs. So we provided blankets and tents and food and other humanitarian handouts. But that's as far as we've gone. Asylum Access was founded to implement a sustainable solution, to say, we need more than just humanitarian aid. We also need to help refugees assert their rights, assert the rights that they've had on paper since the Refugee Convention was passed in 1951. Internationally, across the world, refugees have the right to get legal status and to live safely, to to not fear deportation back to a country that threatens to torture or kill them. And they also have economic rights, the economic rights that Betsy mentioned earlier. They have the right to seek employment. They have the right to travel freely about the country of refuge to obtain that employment. They have the right to enroll their children in school so that you don't have a child like Valentino Achek-Dang, who some of you may have read about in Dave Eggers' most recent book, who spent 13 years growing up his entire childhood in refugee camps. And asylum access makes these rights a reality by putting legal advocates on the ground in refugees' first countries of refuge, helping them to assert their rights to work and put their kids in school, to access health care, to open a bank account and rent an apartment, and take agency to begin rebuilding their lives.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm really honored to be an Equine Green Fellow. Just to tout Equine Green's horn a little bit, there is no other organization in the world that makes this kind of bold investment in an idea and in a powerful person. And in fact, when I got the Equine Green Fellowship, I started reading up the roster of all the other organizations that Equine Green founded. And I thought to myself, wow, there's no other predictor of success for an organization than having Equine Green as a supporter. So thank you so much for inviting me here and giving me this opportunity to tell everyone in this room what I'm doing. To give you just a short introduction to Khmer Legacies, and then I'll go into a bit of the history and the context for the organization. Khmer Legacies is an organization that's creating a videotaped archive about the Cambodian genocide. And we're going to be doing this by having children interview their own parents about their story of surviving the Khmer Rouge. And so my answer to the question I posed earlier, what does it take to heal, is this new organization, Khmer Legacies. What Khmer Legacies provides is what I like to call a holistic approach to the personal trauma and the larger political issues that are relevant to people and countries after a genocide. Just to give you a little history lesson about the Khmer Rouge for those of you who may not be familiar. The Khmer Rouge is a communist regime that ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979 after the Vietnam War. They had a dream of turning the country into an agrarian utopia, and so evacuated all of the city and town people into labor camps. And in less than 4 years, approximately 2 million people, or a quarter of the population, died from execution, starvation, or disease. I believe that learning one's family's story will help the young generation to understand their past and therefore their identity. The experience will bring them closer to their parents and closer to their mother culture. It will lessen feelings of estrangement and isolation, which often in the Cambodian community will lead to drugs, gangs, and crime. It will build the young people's confidence and pride in who they are. Speaking out in Cambodia is a political act. Simply by recording stories about the Khmer Rouge time, we'll be fostering a culture of free expression and free speech. Literature and art about the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia is curiously absent. For instance, it was only last year that the first book was published about the Khmer Rouge, which was written by a Cambodian. The heart of my work is taking a narrative of shame and denial and transforming it into a narrative of heroism and honor. The fourth level is a global level. I do see the work of memorializing the tragedy of the Cambodian genocide as preventive work. What it takes to prevent a genocide is a deep and visceral understanding of the human cost, a moral condemnation of these kinds of ideologies that have a quarter of the population perish. And nothing, I believe, communicates this cost better than a true story told face to face. They will be a living memorial to the suffering and loss, and also courage and heroism.